From the arena to the front office, this is Scoreboard. I'm Chris Titley, and each episode brings you stories from the game of sport, where mindset, money and meaning shape what comes next. Athletes, coaches, owners and business leaders unpack the moments that matter, because the Scoreboard isn't just about winning, it's about life beyond the game. Now let's get to this week's episode. Hi, it's Chris Titley here on today's episode of Scoreboard, the podcast. I'm joined by Christine Finnegan, CEO of the Tasmanian JackJumpers, on what is a fine Brisbane day. How's it going in, where are you? Hobart, are you, Christine?
Well, actually, I am in Hobart. We've been really fortunate with the weather here in recent times. Winter is a little delayed start, but today we're sort of feeling the beginning of it, I think.
And we're sitting here on the 7th of May, 2025. How's your week been, actually, Christine? And then I suppose, how's your year been?
My week's been great. I mean, we're in the off-season at the moment, which means that things aren't quite as hectic as they can be. And we've just enjoyed a little bit of shutdown time with Easter and Anzac Day. We shut the office for 10 days and gave everyone an opportunity to stop and refresh. And I've got to say, having been at the club since day one, we've never had that opportunity. So it's been very nice.
And reflecting on the NBL season, the 24-25 season, some thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, it was a challenging season for us. There's no doubt about it. And kudos to Illawarra, who were amazing and led from really from the start of the season, did a great job and ultimately won the championship. But for us, it was a more challenging season, coming off the back of a championship ourselves, and we were injury plagued, and we had a number of things that just didn't go our way. But not to make excuses, we weren't good enough last season, and we've got to address that in the off season and make sure that we come out firing in season 25-26.
And Christine, your involvement in sport is far and wide, and I want to go back to the early days. Where did that start and how did that start?
Yeah, it's funny. I grew up in Canberra. I had a background in politics, worked in politics, but my passion was always for sport, and I played tennis all my life. I met some of my greatest friends through tennis and great relationships. I got to travel a lot, and I really had this passion for sport, but not so much for playing it, but for actually, being on the other side and running it. And I took an opportunity way back when an opportunity came up in Melbourne at Tennis Australia, and I relocated from Canberra, and that's where it all started.
Yeah, and the various sports you've been through. Do you want to give a bit of the listeners a bit of an idea of the sports that you've been involved in from an admin point of view?
Absolutely. So Tennis Australia, obviously, from a governing body point of view, I worked at agency with John Newcombe for a little bit of time, and then obviously got into Clubland, where I started at the Brumbies. So I went back to Canberra for a short time. I was fortunate enough to be there in 2003 and 4 when the Brumbies were at the height of their popularity, and also winning a championship there, winning a Super 12 title, which was amazing. Relocated back to Melbourne a short time at the Commonwealth Games. Melbourne Storm for 5, nearly 6 wonderful years, Melbourne Rebels, St Kilda Football Club, and now I've made my way here to Tasmania. So a very, very broad background, predominantly in the football codes, across 3 football codes, but it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey for me.
Yeah, Christine, we actually had Pat Howard on the podcast yesterday. I was talking about the story of going down to the Brumbies and those sort of heydays in the early 2000s where it was an amateur game. And obviously at the time then it was I think it was 95 was the time when things started to move towards an amateur. Going back to your career, what was sport like back then?
Yeah, obviously my time at the Brumbies was definitely professional. We had the likes of George Gregan in our team at the time. But, watching sport evolve has been really, and being part of the evolution of sport, has been quite amazing to watch. And it's become way less transactional, and it's a lot more about the engagement and the creation of community. And that really sits at the heart of who I am as a person. So I think as sport has evolved, it's really suited my personality to evolve with it.
And Christine, the importance of grassroots, and we were just discussing around kids prior to this podcast around participation and kids wanting to get out there and play in sport. How important is that as a role as a CEO, and also how important is a club that you've seen for people to actually wanting to play the sport?
Yeah, well, look, at its rawest form, and we can't deny the role that sport plays in physical and mental health of our young people. So very passionate about it from that point of view. But when you look at it through the lens of a club, it really is the beginning of your pipeline. The grassroots is absolutely where you start to engage with children and start to engage them in your brand. And here at the JackJumpers, we do that through a number of programs, mainly curriculum-based primary school programs. That then leads them into a pipeline of coming along to clinics clinics, and ultimately, if they can get a ticket, coming along to a game.
Yeah, and membership seems to be a big thing as well in terms of the ability to go to games. And then there's things like price points, etc. Lots of different things you think about as a club. You must have lots of data, but how do you go about managing all of that? And I suppose where's the priorities? Is it getting people to the games, or is it members, or is it community? Lots of different things as a stakeholder.
Yeah, look, we're a bit of a member-obsessed sporting nation, I've got to say, and coming out of the football codes, obviously your member number sort of signifies how strong or not you are as a club. I'd say the NBL is not as focused on membership. While that is really, really important to us, it's actually about growing the game through eyeballs, through, ticketing, and obviously membership plays into that. Here at the JackJumpers, we've actually got the problem of supply and demand. So, we've only got so many members that can actually access seats to our games. So we've had to think about how we grow our supporter base outside that traditional way of thinking. And it's not always about just buying a membership. It's about how we engage them through other products that we might put out into our community as a way of getting them to, I guess, interact with us. So look, from a membership point of view, we are doing well here. We've probably got, about 12,000 people that are registered for our game day product, anywhere from a 14-game to a 2-game product. We've got 4,000 people that are sitting on what we call a membership waiting list, waiting to get a game day membership. So there's lots of opportunity here to grow that. But for me, it's really about, growing the actual community and growing their engagement with the Tasmania JackJumpers brand.
Yeah, and basketball per se. Let's go back to the JackJumpers. I mean, basketball as a sport in the last decade is enormously grown at a grassroots level, both boys and girls and males and females, etc. But I'm curious about the JackJumpers, an organic team that was built out of the NBL, and you were there for pretty much almost the beginning, and now you're the CEO. Can you give us a bit of an understanding how behind the scenes how that kind of played out and where you were and where you are now?
Yeah, well, I look back to that moment, and I look back on that regularly. And I was in heavy lockdown in Melbourne, and I was actually flicking through LinkedIn, and I saw this advertisement for the CEO of Tasmania's new basketball team. And I'd had a long affiliation with Tasmania, and having been here several times, realised that this was a sports mad state, very parochial state, that actually didn't really have much to cheer for on the national and international sporting stage. And when I saw the ad, I was just so drawn to the opportunity of what was possible to build down here. And I did miss out on that job, but I came in as the Chief Commercial Officer, working closely with the inaugural CEO, Simon Brookhouse. And this club actually started in my lounge room in lockdown in Brighton, Victoria, and both Simon and I went through, hotel quarantine to get here. So the passion to start the club and the commitment to start the club was there right from the start. And it was really about tapping into the parochialism and the authenticity and the humility of Tasmanians and building something that they could be proud of and that they could attach themselves to. And I've got to say, coming out of COVID, there was never a better time to build a community and a place of belonging for the people of Tasmania.
Yeah, and looking back on the 5-year progress thus far, as you took that role, how would you describe that? And I suppose the next 5 years.
I have to say, look, I have been very fortunate in my time here. The Tasmanian business community wanted to engage with us right from the start. As I said, there was a community of people that just wanted something to belong to, so the membership took off quickly. But what we got was a coach that really understands. His job was not just to come and coach a winning team. His job was to come and help the club build a brand across the state. And I haven't worked with a coach that gets it as well as Scott Roth has. And from the moment he got here, he got in his car, he put the mascot suit in the back, and he didn't get in the mascot suit, but he took it around with him. And wherever we went, there was a mascot and Scott Roth helping us build the brand. And for 8 months, that's all we had. We just had him, and we had Jack the Jumper, our mascot, and that built over time. And where I look at where we are now, 5 years on, it's hard to believe what's been achieved from those really early days. We had 8 people in the front office. We had Scott and we had a mascot. And to see where we are today, we've got 50 plus staff. We've got an ever-growing front office. We've got an evolving high-performance team. And things are really, really growing and building in the right direction.
And you've been to a number of successful franchises before and successful clubs and seen them through, like you're talking about the Melbourne and you're talking about St Kilda as well. They've had their highs and the lows. I'm curious to know what what a good sporting club and a good legacy looks like for a sporting organisation?
Look, I think you learn from both, and I think you can see what's working and what's not. But at all of those clubs I've been to, we've been willing to try things, and I think that my greatest learning definitely came from the Melbourne Storm. There was a culture there of togetherness, of building culture, that the front office and the back office worked really closely together, and that everybody was there for a common goal. And there was no time that was more evident than in the 2010 season, when the salary cap hit the club and the club ended up playing for no points. And there was some great leadership at that time. And what that club was able to do was anchor back to why it was there in the first place and its true values. But what they did in that time of crisis was put their people first. And even though they were playing for no points, that there were people that were still members and still wanted to come and watch them play. So every week they went out and gave their all. And that club was built on true grit and grind. And I've got to say my greatest learnings came from there, and from the likes of Craig Bellamy, who I remain great friends with, and Frank Panisi. And I actually recently went back there to talk about that particular time in the Storm's journey. But I've got to say, a lot of what we've built here is really on that grit and grind and just putting our customer first, our people. We know that this club is built on our people. And so we have to make our people feel welcome. And I say this a lot, Tasmanians are two things. They're authentic and they're humble. And we had to build a club that looked like the people we represent, so that they wanted to be part of it. And that's what's happened here, and it's taken off, and it's been very, very successful.
You talk a lot about authenticity as a leader, as a person, and the importance of it. How would you define that word in your career?
Look, I always say that I can't turn up as anyone but myself. If I tried to be someone else, I'd last about 15 minutes and then I'd go back to type. I'm a very hard on sleeve kind of person. And at times that really, really works for me, and at times it doesn't. And I've had to learn over time to evolve my style and my leadership and work out when that really heart-led place, has a place, and when it doesn't. And I'm still learning, and I'm still on my leadership journey. But I will say that what you will always get from me is a great deal of authenticity. I don't believe that you get anywhere by pretending to be somebody you're not. And I will turn up every day and I'll give my best. I'll work hard, but people will always know where I'm at too. And I'm okay to put my hand up. And there are days in leadership that I find tough. There are days in leadership that I find incredibly lonely. And being here in Tasmania, I'm away from my family, I'm away from my friends' network. And I've had those days here. And I think as a leader, people want to know that you're also, you're human, and you can show that humility at times.
Yeah, let's go to the human side of things. I'm going to say a few words, and you're going to sort of say whether you're that person or not, or whether there's something which definitely doesn't describe you. You're going to start with the word confident. Are you a confident person?
I've grown over time to be a confident person.
What about serious?
When I need to be. I'm very serious. I can be serious. I think people would suggest that I'm serious more than I'm not, but I think people that know me on a really personal level would know that I like to have a lot of fun as well.
Are you a nervous person? Do you get nervous?
I used to get really nervous. I'm a lot more confident in myself now. And I guess, Craig Bellamy once said to me, when you're at the front of the room and you're the one talking, everyone in that audience presumes you're the subject matter expert, and you are, because you're at the front of the room. So I back myself now at being at the front of the room, that I am the subject matter expert and I know what I'm talking about. And I presume if I'm doing that well, people will listen.
What about perfectionism?
No, I'm not a perfectionist. In fact, I'm probably one of those people that's willing to try and fail. I've done that many times. I'm a creative person. I've always got a really big idea, and anyone who's worked for me will understand exactly what that means. And sometimes those big ideas really pay off and sometimes they don't. But I'm willing to have a crack, and also willing to put my hand up if those things don't work.
Yeah, a couple more. Resilient?
Very resilient, yeah. I've had trying times in my life, and I say that with great perspective. I have a lot of people around me that have had a lot more trying times than I have, but I've definitely had my challenges through life, and I've got to say that I've been able to get myself back up a number of times, and I'm really proud of that, and I would say that resilience sits at the heart of that.
One more. Empathetic?
Very. Too much. Something that a heart-led leader really needs to work on. My empathy, I am a very empathetic person. I do see things through the lens of others, sometimes at the detriment of myself, and I'm really learning how to balance that out, because there are times when empathy can disappoint you as well.
And moving up the curve into leadership roles and leadership, when did the leadership thing interest you? Has it always been there? Were you school captain at your primary school, or has it sort of been grown over time?
It's actually grown over time. It's a really funny thing. When I was younger and playing tennis, I was very, very competitive. And as I got older, but I was willing to sit back and let others run the show. But as I've got older, I've actually reversed that. I'm less competitive, but I very much want to be at the front and leading and offering an opinion. And I think that I can add value to a room. And I've got an innate sense of understanding what's going on in a room. And I think that I use that for good most of the time. I can read a room really well. I trust my intuition a lot, and I think all of that plays into leadership. And so that's been a natural progression and outcome for me.
Yeah, and some characteristics of a leader, you would say that you need to adapt. Things change at a whim. There's some crises, etc. The Jack Jumpers itself have gone through a little bit of a change recently with an acquisition by a private equity group, which is probably, the whole of the club is probably quite unique in the sporting environment in Australia. Do you want to talk about that and what's that all about and how it's changing?
Yeah, look, definitely. And when I took the role, I knew that Larry was there for the short time and he wanted to get the club established. He's obviously about growing the league, and to grow the league, we need healthy clubs underneath it. So my role was to come in and build the Jack Jumpers to get it to a healthy state that Larry could actually sell the club sooner rather than later. He didn't want the conflict of being, and obviously that's been quite topical in recent times, but he made it very clear that the sooner we could get this club up and running and successful, the more interest we would garner earlier. So that's always been a narrative playing in the background between me and Larry, and certainly something that I've had my eye on. It's also been something I've been trying to shield the business from the whole time. So the sale of the club has been going on. I've been leading that process behind the scenes from a Tasmania JackJumpers point of view, certainly not from the negotiation point of view. But then obviously we've now got it to a point, it's sold into a private equity firm, the Altor Group. They're very engaged early, but there's a transition that now needs to take place. And the transition of knowledge needs to predominantly come from me. I've been there since day one. I know most things about this club. There's very few things that I'd probably have to consult a document or a spreadsheet to be able to answer a question. So they're relying heavily on me to help with that transition. I have to say, being part of it has been it's been a great learning curve for me, and Larry has been including me where he thinks it is appropriate along the process. And having been part of a sporting club acquisition now is something that I'm really proud of, and I'm actually very, very proud that there was so much interest in the club in terms of people wanting to purchase it.
Yeah, it is quite unique, I'd imagine, in terms of a newish club being acquired by a whole 100%. And obviously, in the US, it's quite common, but then there's also partial stakes, and we've seen the rise of the content, the Instagram generation, etc. Something which is probably more prevalent than ever. How important is storytelling? How important is getting player awareness? People know the players' names. And I suppose being out in the community and showing different clips and virality of all this sort of stuff, which is, again, take it back 10 years, wasn't around.
It's so interesting, storytelling is such a big part, but I don't think that I run a basketball club by any means. I run a place of belonging for the people of Tasmania, and something that's become so intensely important to the fabric of this place. So every time I make a decision, I do it through the lens of that. And every time we tell a story, it is through the lens of that. How does our community feel about that? And I can anchor back to the sale in that, how this club is so important to Tasmania. The narrative and the storytelling around that had to be, this will not affect the place that you love, the place that you belong to. Nothing will change. And it was really important to engage the Altor Group as well in that narrative. And they were very clear from the start. They weren't buying a club that was broken, which is a lot of the American model. They like to come in, they like to
buy low, sell high.
Well, absolutely, and I think they were buying a club that obviously is in profit. It's got a good cost base. It's obviously had some success on court, and it's an important part of the fabric of the community. So the Altor Group, when we were talking to them, was very very clear about the fact they didn't want to come in and change anything. And I think that we were able to bring that story to life as that transition took place, because that really would have affected the people that are really engaged with this club. So storytelling at the heart of everything, whether it's on, our wins, our losses, our community, is very much part of what this brand is built on.
You touched on the win-losses there just in a second. When you watch the JackJumpers and they lose, how do you feel? How do you feel if they win? And do you watch every game and do you watch every sort of play that goes by, or are you sort of, again, overseeing everything?
I've become way more emotional as the years have gone on about the wins and the losses, and I ride every moment of them. And we got ourselves into a little bit of a habit of winning in the last second of the game. And I did pull the coach aside and say, look, any danger, you could win by 10 points.
And just relieve the fans' anxiety, right? I'm a Brisbane Lions fan, and like the last few years, is like, I think there's a few grey hairs here because of that as well, yeah.
Well, everybody knows the first 3 quarters of a basketball game is 45 minutes, and the last minute of our games is usually 45 minutes as well. So, it's a long, drawn-out minute. We usually win by a small margin. The coach and I have had numerous conversations about this, and his answer to me is always, it's about the people, Finny. They've got to enjoy that. They've got to enjoy it to the very end. So a little bit of a cushion here and there would be very gratefully received. But at the moment, we do win, and that's, we do win a lot at home too, and that's through grit and grind. And this, I go back to our community, this sixth teammate we've got in the stands that really gets us over the line in those crucial moments and those crucial games.
Yeah, I was chatting to Mal Watts from Brisbane about the game day experience and what he was trying to do in Brisbane and basing itself on the US, and basically almost saying, you just got to try it. You just got to go once, and then you're kind of hooked. I'm keen to understand your thoughts and theories around game day experience.
Look, it's a sports and entertainment product, and so you have got the license to have fun there, and it's high octane entertainment, and it's full on, and it's not for everybody, and we try to cater for everybody at our games through noise, sensory, and all the rest of it, but we are willing to have a crack at the engagement that we have with our audience. And one thing that, there's been many great moments for me at this club, but one thing that never ceases to make me feel incredibly proud is those moments where we're throwing things out into the crowd and we see, hundreds of kids running around wanting to catch something and screaming and excitement. And, when you see that what the brand you represent has created that for the young children and the engagement that it creates, you can't be anything but proud. We don't always get it right, and that's okay. We'll have a crack and we try different things. Generally in those moments, we're working with partners as well. So we're trying to integrate their product into what we're doing. And I think that there's been nothing more successful than our integration of the Hungry Jacks partnership into our game day. It's become really synonymous with those free throws, and everybody gets right into it and right behind it.
Yeah, there was a moment in the NBA last year I think it was with Wingstop, where the guy deliberately missed 2 free throws at the end of the game, basically because it was a terrible free throw shooter, but he got the crowd going. He's like, am I going to miss? They're like, miss, and he cheered and they sort of waved to them a little bit. It was right at it. It didn't matter the game. There was and whatnot, but it's kind of fun, this interaction. I'm also curious, like you mentioned feedback there, like the feedback you get from your fans, the feedback you get from management, stakeholders, a board, players, coaches, etc. How do you go with that? How do you filter it? And then again, I suppose to refine and improve. How do you learn from that?
Well, I'm sure Larry Kesselman won't mind me saying this, but I see feedback as a gift, and it's lucky I do because Larry is very good at providing feedback, and that is whether it's positive or things that I can grow out of. But he has really helped me grow as a leader through feedback, and I've been really open to receiving that. So it started with Larry on a very one-on-one personal level, and now it's grown. I get my feedback from my board, I get it from my staff, and of course we get it from the people that come along to our games and are not shy in telling us how we're going. And look, I think, if people take the time to actually write to you or ring you to give you feedback, then you've got to take that as a positive because they actually think you're worth it. And so, even if we only get a minority of negative feedback around certain things that we do or partners we might engage with, I do try at a very personal level, and that's what Tasmania is built on. It's a very personal relationship to ring those people to explain why we've done things. And so, I do say feedback's a gift. It's a common phrase in our office that feedback is a gift, but it's a gift that only people that really care about you are willing to give you. And I think we should all we should all look at it that way.
Did you take feedback early on in your career as a little bit personal?
Definitely. And look, there are times that you still do. I mean, you can't avoid that. And it also depends on the way feedback is delivered. And over time, what I've realised with Larry particularly, that he employs a lot of people across 23 businesses. He's got probably around 20,000 staff. If he's going to take the time to sit down with me for an hour and talk to me about the things that he wants me to work on or improve on, then I need to be very, very grateful for that. But not only be grateful for it, take it away and do something with it. And I think that what Larry has been happy to see in our relationship is the fact that what he does tell me, I go away and I work on. And I think that's been the evolution of me potentially not getting the CEO in the first round and then evolving into that role over that time, was Larry being able to view the fact that the things he was telling me I needed to learn and grow in, I was actually actioning, and therefore the results came for me.
We've talked about feedback, and we've talked about like the social media generation, but sometimes feedback and or criticism and or passion can go the wrong way and things can get a little bit ugly. And I still see players out there. I think Lachie Neale put a post out for the Lions even 2 weeks ago going that like we lost a game of footy, right? Stop saying some horrible, like really deep and meaningful, horrible things. I'm curious to know how you think about that and how you deal with it, and some of your players as well that might actually be attacked on social media.
I think feedback from people you care about and feedback from people that are financially invested or invested in you in a consistent way is really important. That to me is not feedback. That is actually it's just not acceptable, and it's becoming worse and worse in this sphere. We've had players get death threats. We've had players' wives get death threats. We've had players' wives who are pregnant saying, "I wish your baby would die." Like, we've had terrible situations of personal safety that have evolved out of this social media landscape, and it's not good. I remember at St Kilda just asking the players just not to read their social media. I mean, these are young men in my case, I work in a male-dominated sport. They're young men. I have a 22-year-old son at home who I would hate to read stuff that people have written about him in that lens, and I would hate him to read that stuff about himself. And they're still, their minds are still growing and evolving, and I can't help but think that must shape them in some sort of negative way. So I agree with Lachie Neale. I agree with all of the people that are actually finally coming out and taking a stance on it. And we know Scott Roth did last year. He was quite vocal about the fact this just has to stop. It really is quite unsettling and quite unnerving for those young men and their families.
Absolutely, 100% agree. I'm also curious around parent behaviour at sport, basketball at a grassroots level. The parents are quite close, the officials are quite close, as opposed to maybe cricket or where it's in the middle and a few things. So their behaviour can kind of go either way. Have you seen instances where you're like, this is unacceptable as well? And is there something there around parent education, around participation and behaving at sporting games?
I definitely think that's where it starts. In my first 12 months here in Tasmania, I spent a year on the board of BTAS before I became CEO. And most of the things we were dealing with at a board level were complaints about parent behaviour on the sidelines. And we're talking about under 10s and under 12s. And, that sort of behaviour is going to shape the way the kids then behave. And I think that parent education is a huge thing. I walk into many of the stadiums around the state here, and the first thing I read is that referees are doing their best job, please respect them. Like, the messages are actually directed at the parents, not the children. And I think that that's a sad state of affairs when we get to that. At the JackJumpers, at the most professional, at the most senior level, we reward the players that do their best job on the bench. And I think that there's got to be a greater focus on the kids that are not on the court, that are doing their bit on the sidelines and on the bench, and really understanding that team is about how everybody contributes. I know when my son was playing at a junior level, it was always about, my kid's not getting a run, he's not on the court. But and in basketball, that's actually one of the things that makes parents most irate, is when their son or daughter's not on the court. So I think it's about really educating and looking at programs of how you can really educate people about what true teamwork looks like. And that starts with the parents. I mean, it'd be almost worth bringing in a Parent of the Week award, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. And I kind of feel like there's almost a course that you need to take, like a one pager or something, like a code of conduct which you accept, and then you can sort of be. I mean, it would open up a can of worms, I suppose, for dobbing in and things like that. But it might help. Like, I'm just something, I suppose. I mean, if it is such a problem, and you're seeing the tail end of that cause people then abusing players on social media, probably, or the effect, I suppose, of that down the track. So there's something has to change, so to speak.
Oh, it has to be, and I think that sort of behaviour from parents is teaching their children that winning is everything, and there is nothing between winning. And I think that is an unrealistic view of the world. No, we're not always going to win all the time. We've all, I've worked in professional sport for a long time. I've played sport myself. You don't always win, and that's okay. And when we create this environment where it's so hostile all the time, usually around winning or around their own child, it's a very dangerous environment that we create. And I definitely think there needs to be more in place, and we probably need to play a greater role in that.
Yeah, just touching on winning there for a second. If I ask you about your 5-year plans for the Jack Jumpers, where do you want to see the Jack Jumpers? I'm wondering whether winning is going to enter the conversation or not, because it does dictate a little bit of success, quote unquote, for the year, or how the team went, etc. But it's a little bit out of your control as well.
So we measure our success of our business on 5 pillars, of which on-court success is one of them. And I've said this time and time again, we are definitely not there to make up the numbers. So absolutely finals each year is something that we aim for. And certainly winning a championship is definitely amongst our plans. And, we may have won it earlier than we expected, but at no point was that a fluke. That's been, a lot of planning, a lot of grit and a lot of grind from everybody involved in the club. Our other success is also judged on our commercial sustainability and viability, our engagement with our community, how much we're going to grow the game of basketball, and how much players and staff want to be at our club. Are we a destination club? And when we measure ourselves on those 5 things at the end of every season, we mark ourselves out of 10 out of each of those things. There is no point winning a championship if we're losing $10 million a year and people hate coming to work. Equally, if we're making lots of money and we're not winning a championship, that's not success either. So success is when we are doing well across all 5 of those pillars. But of course, the hero, the public part of that is winning championships.
Yep, and Christine, the Jack Jumpers are a men's team. There's a new ownership. We're talking about business for sport, new ownership of the WNBL. There's been some sort of understanding around what's happening for next season, but I'm curious to know about having a female team and expanding teams and expansion teams and the business of sport.
There's no doubt, and I've been very public about the fact that I think Tasmania deserves a WNBL licence and a team in that competition. It certainly won't be for next season, but certainly for the season after. One thing we're very fortunate of here is that we've got government and I must say bipartisan support in politics here, that sport plays such an integral and important role for our young people. So they have been willing to fund the success of our men's team and have offered that for our women's team as well. So I can take to the WNBL a very robust license model that we will be able to sustain, financially sustain ourselves and be able to really put a team on the court that's competitive and equal to what we've been able to do in the men's game. So based on all of those things, my submission will be going to the WNBL by the end of this week, and I'll be hoping that we'll be awarded a licence for 26-27, and that will be another great thing for this state. We'll probably play our games predominantly up in the north and the northwest of the state, so that will make sure that basketball at the professional level is truly covering the state of Tasmania.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, I look forward to some exciting news, hopefully, in the future. Christine, I'm going to a couple of questions I ask my guests. One is the scoreboard moment, which is a moment in your life which is pretty visual. You can remember it, and you're like, actually, forever I'll remember this moment because it kind of changed and altered my life. I'm interested to know what your scoreboard moment is.
Look, I've had a few over my life, but it's hard to go past the moment where we won the championship in Game 5 in Melbourne. Not so much for what had just happened on the court, but the journey that it took to get to that place. And standing next to me was my 20-year-old at the time son, and I remember the elation in him and myself. We hugged it out, but there was this moment between us that will remain kind of unsaid, that, you've done it, Mum. You've pulled yourself out of, this where he would have seen the resilience play out more times than anyone. And that moment will stick with me forever, and it still gives me goosebumps thinking of it. I couldn't think of anyone in my life that I would have rather shared that moment with than my son. And then to go and enjoy the celebration with Scott and the team was seriously, it was magical, and something that, I may never repeat, but something that I'll take with me forever.
Yeah, no one can take it away from you.
No one can.
Your favourite all-time sporting moment, which may also be that moment, but I'm curious to know what if it is different, what if you've got one.
I'd have to say, some of the time I think, that I spent at the Melbourne Storm and the championships that we won there. They're probably both. I was there for 2 winning championships, ultimately both taken away. But those moments of euphoria that, you work with these people all day, every day, they become your family. Sport's very different to other businesses, is that you become so entangled into what you're doing because it's not a 9-to-5 job, so it becomes your family. So when you share those moments with people you care about, certainly, I guess for me, I've seen a major sporting events on the international field, Wimbledon and all of those things, but for me it's been the ones that I've been involved with that are truly the ones that mean the most to me.
Christine, one final question, some advice for some younger people, potentially the Christine of young, who was like, okay, I love sport. This is awesome. I can see all the benefits. I can see the mental benefits, the physical benefits. I love it. I love playing at an amateur level. Even if I don't love playing, I love it. How do I get involved? And your pathway, in retrospect, some advice to some people that may want to take your pathway.
Well, back yourself in. And I think, I haven't got a traditional background of a CEO. And certainly from a gender in male sports, there's still not a lot of women, at this level. So I've had to back myself in. I've had to put really good people around me, and I've had some great professional mentors around me, and they have predominantly been men, and I've been very lucky to have that. I've also got a great supporting network from friends and family that I lean into. So, I call it my personal board and my professional board, and those are the people that, can really help guide you through your careers, and you must use them and lean into them and be prepared to be vulnerable with them, and they will help you through your journey. The sporting landscape is changing and evolving in that we're running businesses. We're truly running businesses now. We're running businesses that need to engage from, as you've spoken about, storytelling, so from brand, from commercial, from high performance. There's so many elements to running a business now. So, when I get into work every day, I'm not really in the weeds of what's happening on the basketball court. I'm in the weeds of what's happening in our business. So if you truly love a wide range of things in your life and all those different elements and all those different pillars I spoke to, then this is a great career for you, and anyone can do that. You don't need to do that through the lens of gender. And I must say, one of the best relationships, one of the strongest relationships I have at this club is our coach, Scott Roth. Him and I work incredibly well together. There's a mutual respect there that can't even be measured. And I think that, back yourself in and who knows what's possible.
Christine, are there any hacks or quotes or anything that you think that's an easy, quick fix and to be successful in businesses, like get a good sleep, or does Scott throw you quotes? Is the WhatsApp chat full of motivational inspiration, or is it cups of tea, don't have too much coffee?
I woke up to a text from Scott yesterday, and he said I had to get the book called Let Them. I think is it Renee?
Oh, reading. Okay. Yes.
Yep, reading. So that. So a little bit more advanced to what I recommend to everyone, which is a beautiful Dr. Seuss book called Oh, the Places You Will Go, and it will allow you to take all different turns in your life. You won't always get it right, but it'll, it's up to you how you get back up from that and get back on the right track. So no particular quote, but I guess the end of that book says, "You kid, you will succeed 98.75% guaranteed." And I backed it in, and I love that.
That's awesome. The children's book, I've got one called Odd Dog Out too, which most people should read, and I think everyone should. There was a David Williams movie recently, which I watched as well, which was about the dad becoming a billionaire but then losing all his mates. I can't remember what it's called, but every kid should watch that as well. But Christine, thank you so much for being part of Scoreboard, the podcast today. I really do appreciate sharing your journey and your journey more recently with the JackJumpers to the success that they saw on the court and also success they're seeing off the court and for the next chapter under the new ownership. And I wish you well and looking forward to following the progress and supporting the JackJumpers as well.
Thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate having a chat with you.